Hey friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff. Now, I did recently a video on feminism and it got a lot of attention, and one of the more interesting comments was about proof. So I'm going to give you a bit more information about feminism, the betrayal that many women feel, and let's just start off. Many women used to call themselves feminists, believing that it was the path to empowerment and equality. But what they followed is its modern-day currents. A growing sense of betrayal begun to take hold. It promised liberation, but for many, it seemed to have delivered the opposite. Pardon me. Now, the word feminist itself seemed to be up for debate. It has no clear definition. It is split into many branches. From the 4B, you have the 4B movement, the TERFs, the radical feminists, the Marxists, the Marxist-Leninists, communists, the various women's collectives, the various non-white Marxist feminist groups. So, a growing number of researchers cannot actually reconcile what a feminist is. Now, if you give women a question, what is a feminist, right? Many young women, and you can see here, will not identify as a feminist. However, if you allegedly give them a clear definition, that is just advocating for equal opportunities, so they, of course, go for it. But, however, that only got the numbers up to, so from 33% to 53%. So just telling them equality gets the numbers up over. So you can see, particularly amongst Gen Z, even if you promise them everything, it's not 100%, and it's not even really a true majority because they have to massage the numbers by changing the question. So we look at the promise. Now, the promise of feminism was not equality. Now, it's been more clearly defined as equity. Now, to be clear, the goals of feminism were not clearly defined. First wave feminism promised the right to vote. However, with that came assumptions that they would be considered a legal person, which in fact they already were, but they had more rights, right? The rights to own property, well, that's debatable. The right to get an education. Yes, there was clear discrimination, but there were many women, including Mary Shelley, who did get an education. So again, the actual promises and of course the right to find work, well, again, the actual promises. Again, this was all about exploiting women's labour, getting them into the workplace. See, women were resisting work. Okay, they already felt they had too much at home. But in many ways, feminists argued women were the property of their husband. So after getting the vote, feminism nearly died out. And then came the second wave feminism. Now, this was brought about by economics. Post-World War II, women were in the workplace, but came along a new thing, the birth control pill. Reproductive rights started becoming an issue, and feminists took on increasing, talking points about rape culture, marital rights. And again, just because a few people broke the law, it was right, they felt they needed more laws. So government exploited feminism yet again for overreach. First, they exploited women to get them into the workplace so they could tax their labour. Second wave, they exploited women into getting them higher pay so they could exploit them even further and reproductive freedom, i.e. getting them ready for population control, population management and destruction of the nuclear family, because they wanted to exploit men even more. Men wouldn't do overtime. They'd go home to their families. Happy family men? No. Happy family men owning houses? Oh, no! That land belongs to the equity, the financial class. So you got to remember, a lot of first wave feminists were the daughters and wives of the rich and the nobility. So don't think they were on your side. This is all about manipulation. It was all about the promise. Now, the first and second waves lied. But see, the lies took hold. But there was clear, tangible goals that women could fight for, and there were issues they could point to in society where there were women who weren't getting adequately paid. But companies' profits, well, prices had to soar, things got out of control, and did the cracks appear there? No, the cracks were always there, they just widened. So the feminist movement became divided. Starting in the 1990s, third-wave feminism started with deconstructionism, changing the idea of what a woman was, influenced by postmodern ideas such as, of course, deconstruction, ending of they first embraced individualism and altruism, right? They embraced and celebrated diversity. They expanded to include women of colour and started addressing different kinds of oppression, classism, racism, sexism. They all became intersectionality. Now that's where things really started to get divided, because without a doubt, despite having conversations, there were no conversations. Critics of feminism were pointing out all the errors. The head feminists, or the influencers of the time, Jane Fonda, just kept this Gloria, what's her name, and that other broad who disappeared, or we hope disappeared, Hillary Clinton. They all just basically attacked men as misogynists, right? Any criticism is misogyny. Any facts are, in fact, based on fallacies. So the lack of cohesion, the lack of profound debate led to a sense of profound betrayal, as women actually started to experience the cracks in feminism for themselves, where people, now we're not just talking about Spain or any one area, but it's believed generally in Spain, working women started to experience in Spain the migration replacement first, where women, Spanish women working in these big wineries and big olives, and I forget what else. There were various these big farm conglomerates, European farm conglomerates in Spain, and they started replacing the female Spanish workers with Africans. And they said, oh, no. The unions were selling, and the socialists sold them on the idea, intersectionality. You'll get management jobs, but how do you give millions of women management jobs? It was ridiculous. So the signs were there, and it spread across Europe, then America, but it's no one thing, right? Just what happened in Spain was what was different, but every feminist group around the world, you had trans, you had mass migration, you had women suddenly finding their having to deal with their sons and daughters not able to find work because of their skin colour. Where in the past the women were marching for the rights of people of colour to get work, there wasn't enough jobs to go around, so they were just rearranging the deck chairs. They were giving one job from one group to another group to another group. They kept just shifting around. They weren't actually expanding the economy. And so you have now, right, a constant unemployed class where the women betrayed their own children for their short-term political satisfaction, because they gained nothing financially or personally from these protests. They never became the CEOs. They never got the adequate pay rise that they wanted. In fact, real spending until 2024 was on the decline. And it's still plateauing out. Real spending has not increased that much. It's still pretty low. Now, so women started examining the sources of the betrayal, right? Obviously, they first, the Clintons, the Pelosi's, you had the various movements in England, all the socialist groups, they're all trying to point to the patriarchy, right? But women aren't that... They assumed women were stupid. Turns out, right, that when you are betraying somebody to their face, right, you don't need to be a genius. They know the betrayer, right? The words came from the very group, right? And when women tried to fix this, what they call misplaced priorities, that is, why are you, meddling in the workplace when there's oppression in other countries, Nope, we've got to fix America. We have to fundamentally fix America before we can do anything else. But you are protest groups from England, from France, from Germany, you're all coming here to America. Oh, sorry. This is what feminists are saying, or former feminists are saying, that groups from other countries would come to America, right, to fix America, but they don't actually care, right? They had the big movement about fixing South Africa, but nothing else, right? Nothing about Iran. As I covered yesterday, there were more men and women protesting against the Ayatollah Khomeini in West Texas than there were around America for Renee Good. Most of these feminist marches don't even get 1,000, but they use the technique of reusing footage, and people are starting to notice that. So they are now realizing the movement itself, right, instead of touching on global issues of slavery, drug trade, trafficking of women, but because trafficking of women covers border protection, no, because it goes against that intersectionality. Don't oppress brown people, so you can't address the drug trade. You can't address people being kidnapped and taken to Mexico. You cannot address so many issues that feminism is losing an entire generation. Because many Gen Zers feel that there's a deep sense of hypocrisy, particularly around empowerment, where most women are not empowered. They have to obey the feminist handbook. But what feminist handbook? Every time they ask questions, instead of getting basic answers, you have to go to lectures, you have to pay money, you have to go to protest marches, you have to give up your individuality, cut your hair a certain way, certain colour, get septum rings. They all start becoming identitarian groups. And this is not feminism anymore. It is cultural Marxism. But where they're losing Gen Z is the alienation of men. Because a lot of Gen Zers come from single mother households. They see their brothers. They wonder why they look at all these migrants and see families, and they don't understand. Mummy, why don't we have a family? But they say they're evil. Well, but my brother's not evil. He's never hurt me, and so it goes, right? The more questions Gen Z asks, the better, right? We should always encourage questions, even if they're loaded questions, even if you know they should know the answer or research the answer themselves. If someone much younger than you asks a question, guide them to the answer, but don't dismiss the question. It's a danger to make. It makes you. That's what boomers did to young women. We can't fall into that trap. I really sincerely hope that Gen Z understands the difference between Gen X and Gen Y. You know, the millennials. The Gen X are caught in the middle between the boomers who robbed society blind with free healthcare, and they run up the debt. They contributed nothing, right? They gambled away or lost all their life savings on all these schemes, the financial products like derivatives, the great transfer of wealth to all the banks. Gen Z is, gambling, sports betting, splurging on luxury goods and holidays around the world, saving nothing for retirement, right? They build the state for retirement homes, their healthcare, all the food programs, everything under the sun, right? Medicare, Medicaid, pharmaceutical subsidies, subsidized housing, subsidized cleaning of their housing, subsidized power, you name it. They're boomers have robbed society. So they turn to look at me as a slightly older person, right? But as a person who, right, it shouldn't just be about me, but as a person of my age, many of us paid taxes that just went straight into the pensions of boomers. But people my age are starting to look at the pensions and they see the shrinking spending power of the pensions being evaporated. Right? You can't live on a pension anymore. As a single person, they are forcing two-income households, even when you are not having any extravagant spending. Just meeting basic expenses is starting to get out of hand. And this is hurting women. Single women who have been told, well, just move in with your friends. But they can't get along. There's all these group homes now where dozens of women live in these, single bedroom places with a few trinkets of their childhood. And they lock their doors and just lay on their bed watching TV all day. Again, you could argue that these are grown adults who made decisions, but they were pressured to making these decisions. Right? You speak to a former feminist, and they will tell you about you have no free will in feminism. Right? I encourage everybody to at least watch an anti-feminist female. Right. But I'm just bringing you the news, right? Because that's what I do. I bring the issues forward to you to make your own decisions. And I think a lot of men understand, right, that, it's not all women. But while feminists are empowered by the state, and while they empower the state is the real enemy. The state is exploiting feminism to exploit men. And Gen Z is waking up to that fact. All right. We walk so they can run. So this is what's so important about watching the entire video. Now, a return to true equity, right, is impossible. There is no solution. You have to abandon the fight for equity. You have to realize equity is cultural Marxism, and what you want is individuality, to go your own way. So that means not being a feminist. That means if you want to get married and have children, there should be no one with the right to pressure you otherwise, right? But this is why there's no laws against protesting, right? Free will, free speech, all these things are actually there not to protect your rights, but to protect the mechanisms of the state so that their paid actors, right, for these NGOs, have something to fall back on every time you say, no, stop bullying me. No, I'm just exercising my free speech. And then they go on a rant and tirade about how men bully women. So, abandonment of equity, right? It's cultural Marxism, return to the fundamental principles of individuality and merit, right? The true, I'm not sure where people actually got the idea that the state has any right to control the workplace, but it's always the greater good, right? And this is the problem. But next is attacking the culture of victimhood, where Me Too, cultural Marxism and cultural feminism, where false accusers can be believed as long as they're women. particularly women of colour, and get away with lying. Second, third, fourth, fifth wave feminism, gone. Mass migration ended. Government should cut migration dramatically to less than half the population growth rate, natural population growth rate. There should be expulsion of criminal migrants. There should be no cultural programs whatsoever other than the native language and cultures of the Europeans, the European settlers. The West should not become colonies of India, Africa, or China. They exploit feminism. They encourage feminism. Look at the leading feminists in the UK, Indian, Jewish, and African. And it's predominantly more coming in America. It's more and more Latinos, which is ironic because in Spain, they're not talking about what happened to the Spanish women, are they? Because they don't want to identify with them because they're people of colour. They don't want to identify the fact that they're European, or they know they have European names and descendant of European settlers. Isn't that right, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez? You're the great granddaughter of the king of the conquistadors. But the movement itself, right, has become a church, and you see it, right? There's no room for diversity of thought. They have an orthodoxy. They have their own sex. They have their own identifying, like, you got the blue hairs, you got the nose rings, you've got the lesbians. There is no room in feminism anymore for a straight white woman, and more are increasing in understanding, right, that feminism has been a grift, and a powerful grift, and for a few, very financially rewarding for some female authors, a handful, and very, very rewarding for a handful of female CEOs who, once they got into positions of power, realised that you don't want to catfight with any other woman, so you excluded all other women from the board. And if they sued, it always was the company, not you, who paid the price. So, again, right, how many times have you heard about companies sued, right? But the thing is, the women who sued still feel betrayed, and still didn't get the job, and soon the money they won in these lawsuits ran out, right? It's the same with divorce. All these women, as soon as the money runs out, they start regretting it, realising how short-term pleasure leads to nothing but misery. So the feeling of betrayal won't go away until modern feminism or comes to an end. But however, the belief and the promise of equal under the law, that's long past, right? That now feminism is nothing but a divisive movement. It's like the Whigs, right? Old political parties, right? Even the death of the Tory party. They're old. They're outdated. Their ideas and beliefs they don't even adhere to. The cultural shift even today. Like the Democrats today are not the Democrats of even the Clinton era. JFK would have been a Republican by all definition, according to some. But what controversials and continues for the striving of society is up to you. The individual should have, right? Because we have the legal means. We realise that protesting most of the time is nothing more than attention grabbing. But most protests these days turn violent. And now, of course, increasingly protests want to become revolutions. Now, this is where you get sticky because we don't really want revolutions in democratic countries where the change of government should and be a legal process. But the left celebrate the coup in Ukraine while condemning the coup in Venezuela, which is weird, or Argentina, and then later when the Marxists take over, they celebrate them, and then when there's a overthrowing of that government, so there is so much hypocrisy that feminists just are not leaving in droves, but drabs. But the fact they're leaving it all is big, because remember, up until the 60s, feminism was only growing. Since the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s saw stagnation. Since about 2012, the Me Too movement definitely started to be the coming of the decline. When Me Too peaked, everybody realised what a scam it was. But society should always strive to make sure that its citizens are taken care of and stop caring about international affairs beyond, a country's ambitions, right? If the left, right, left talking about global affairs, they never stood up to China, they never stood up to Pol Pot, the Rwanda, the list goes on, right? And they complain about interference. So every angle we look at this, we cannot become hypocrites ourselves. We need a clear definition going forward of what a movement is, and it's so simple. When men go their own way, it's not. There's no handbook. There's no membership. There's no central committee that we answer to. And if my fellow man wants to be a monk, I'm not going to condemn him. If I just want to be an anti-feminist, he does not condemn me. Feminists can learn a lot. And when women go their own way, then yes, women have the right and the options. But I'm not saying this woman or that woman or what. It is, right? And sure, people are going to have lots of arguments and lots of debates. But ultimately, feminism is a cooked goose. So is Islam, and so is Marxism. It is ultimately, people are waking up to the various collectives. What are your thoughts, however? Where do you see did you suffer a feminist betrayal? Have you been betrayed by feminists? Do you think feminism has betrayed women? Or what do you see differently? Because a lot of people still believe feminism is about equity, but it never was, right? Equity is a cultural Marxist thing in the last 20 years. So, what are your thoughts? And again, just a quick look, here we have the stats. Not many, roughly 1/3. Again, this is where, cooking the stats, well, if we say it's just equal opportunity for women, only 53%. So women don't want, right, this any type of feminism in large numbers. Again, they say, oh, but younger generations. Yeah, of course Gen Z want opportunities, But remember, it's not feminism they're asking for. It's equal opportunities in the workplace they're asking for, right? Equal. But there are still those who want a leg up, particularly, younger people who are starting out, finding it hard to find a job. Absolutely, of course they want a leg up. Feminism is off. That's where feminism is thriving, right? Claiming it's about advocating for equal rights and opportunities, when significantly more realize, well, wait a minute, what's all this other nonsense about racism, colonialism, reparations? Why am I caring about Uganda or Rwanda or South Africa when I can't meet my bills, right? When my paycheck or my pension or the government funding, when I go to a doctor, right, about a pain in my knee, right, and to find out there's nothing can be done, and he still charges me a small fortune, right? Because there's so many things, right? So many problems for the average person. They see all these existential things, external things, as none of my business. Do you? So I believe that it doesn't necessarily what you believe, but I want the conversation. So go ahead. Tell me what you think. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. Now you can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm like, wow. I'm glad to see new subscribers. Hope to see more of you, more new faces, and more conversations, because conversations lead us to getting to a place where we have clear definitions, clear directions, and a clear understanding of people having individuality as opposed to some some pleasing of politicians by being part of some cult. I mean collective. Nah, it's cult. So see you in the next video, and bye for now.